So welcome back to the AM show. It's now time for us to deal with the big stories. Now, IMF program, Parliament's role in ensuring we make the best of the deal. Now that we've started talking about, we've started engagement with the IMF, what can Parliament do to, check on what exactly we are getting out of this deal? Also on the table today, teachers are on strike over what they call cost of living allowance COLA. What can Parliament do to resolve the issues at hand? Again, absenteeism in Parliament. Anyaa Sowutuom fails to appear before the Privileges Committee. What is there to say? What is the next action to take? Today we've assembled two members of Parliament in the House to help us digest these issues. Alhassan Suhuyini is MP for Tamale North. He is here with me. I mean, this has been his fault. He used to be in the media, so he knows what we're doing. Honorable, good morning.
Good morning, my brother.
How are you doing?
I'm terrific, thank you.
Good.
Hope you are well too.
I'm fine.
Nice.
And then, okay, I won't say my name, but Dr. Dickson Adomako Kissi is MP for Anyaa Sowutuom. Is also here. Oh, good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
Very well.
Okay.
Very well. I'm happy to be here.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have you. Let's start with the IMF because
Okay.
that is the major issue in Ghana. Everyone is talking about it. There were predictions that Ghana will be going back to the IMF. Government denied that there was no way we were going to go, but eventually we had to go. And the IMF officials are in Ghana. The discussion started yesterday. Let me start with you, Doc. When your government denied that we are not going to go to the IMF because nothing pointed to the fact that we have to go, and then there had to be that publicity turnaround, how did it come across to you?
Well, in fact, this whole story hasn't been taken easily. I mean, personally, it's shaken me. It's a shock of some sort. But I think, looking at the genesis of all of this, the key point is that, and I said this in local parlance, death, disgrace, and life. And really, we've had to choose life in the sense that no amount of words can change reality. And what I mean by that is, at this point in time, we're dealing with meeting obligations of government, statutory payments, and loan arrangements or agreements that we have to meet, or else doom prevails. And at that point, I think we don't need to wait till we're there, where people's salaries, pension reimbursements cannot be done. And that will send us into some very severe consequences on our economy, on our lives, and for that matter, the health and wealth of this nation. So, case in point, I think that one, IMF is going to be more of a help to the country at this point in time. And then more importantly, I think what I appreciate is the fact that they are more of a policing economic sort of machinery, and for that matter will put us in check. And I think the timing is about right. We've had freedom for some few years because when we came into government, we still were managing the country with IMF on board, and even extended it for a few more months than the initial deadline. And I think their absence for, I think, about 3 years hasn't helped us as much as we wished. Now,
So what that means is that without the IMF, you cannot police yourself.
not necessarily. I think that the key thing, and let me state this categorically, is the fact that the checks have always been there. IMF has been there doing the checks. Even when we went off IMF, by virtue of the fact that we have relations with them, an outstanding agreement, and as it is, that they've been with us all this time, and have been with other nations, including the Brits and the Americas and the Canadians. I mean, they've been with us. But this is a time where we are actually embracing them again, instead of the Mackenzies and these other firms that were helping us do very bold things. Okay. And I think that our biggest troubles were, one, the shortfalls in the tax revenues of this country. Some blunders were made to some extent, in the sense that when we came on board, we threw out some taxes and then expanded government expenditure by way of the flagship programs. And we're talking about free SHS, we're talking about NAPCO, we're talking about many, planting for food and job, many governmental audacious things, building huge facilities.
But when you're promising to do those, didn't you know the state of the economy?
Well, I think one of the things that hoodwinked us is COVID, and that's real. It goes to many industries, and one of our biggest chunk is tourism in this country, where, as you know, the year of return brought in some revenue for hotel industry and for other tourist sites, including where they buy souvenirs and things like that. So we lost that chunk. I always say my flight to Europe or US sometimes is more than the taxes Ghana puts on them, and we lost a bit of that too when we stopped flights coming in and out of this country. And not just when we stopped, even when we opened our borders again for flights, the frequency reduced because of COVID, and government revenues from just the airline industry dropped drastically. And that is a huge chunk of our foreign incomings flow. And beyond that, to many of our relatives that we depend on for small businesses in this country also were not sending remittance. And that also was due to COVID's ravaging behavior in the Western Hemisphere. And that is also a fact.
Okay.
Many of our people have projects, even their own homes, in this country. And that is a direct relation to the masons, carpenters, plumbers in this country. A lot of our expatriates or diasporans are supporting this country through their effort of trying to build a home that they can come to when they come back home. And COVID killed a lot of their jobs. So, a lot of them couldn't be sending any money.
Why is a country like Cote d'Ivoire's situation different from Ghana's when we all...
I think there's no way. I mean, looking at the numbers of Ghanaians that remit to Ghana, I think we're on the high side compared to Cote d'Ivoire. I'm saying that is a huge chunk.
What I mean is that the COVID was not specific to Ghana. Cote d'Ivoire, all countries experienced it. But it looks like our case is or has deteriorated compared to this. And I'm trying to find out from you, why is that the case? That they are doing quite well.
I wouldn't say that we have deteriorated.
Really?
I mean, looking at, for instance, the key thing here is that government's bold agendas. I mean, Agenda 111, for instance, is huge. Ambulance per district constituency, huge. Cote d'Ivoire didn't take on these things. Cote d'Ivoire didn't take on free SHS, which is a huge chunk. I mean, if you look at as doubling what the NDC government was doing in terms of monies taken to education. I mean, quite recently, it was clear that under the NDC government, it was, I think, about 20 million and MPP did 40 million. The numbers are there. The loans that we've all agreed to are there. You know, over 120 projects, sea defense, fish landing sites, just to name a few. Interchanges, where phase 2 were done by us, or phase 3 of some of these, you know. These are things that Suhuyini and I agreed to in Parliament. And sometimes I beg to differ when they say that all these are loans we all thought were prudent in the interest of developing Ghana. And when you compare Cote d'Ivoire to us, I would tell you that we were more ambitious. We did huge projects, or we're doing huge projects, which are very...
And are those the reasons why our inflation is skyrocketing? Because that of Cote d'Ivoire, I learned, is around 3.5 in May 2022. Yours is hovering around...
Ours.
Yeah, okay, ours.
Because I think you're living in
exactly.
Yeah.
Ours is hovering more than 20%. That's a huge gap between us and Cote d'Ivoire.
Our country runs on fuel, and fuel prices have affected us, whether you like it or not. Fuel prices...
Cote d'Ivoire's economy also runs on fuel.
Well, not to the extent. I mean, for instance, listen, our economies are different. That's a fact. Now, when you talk about Cote d'Ivoire, let me tell you one key thing. Cote d'Ivoire's support by France is huge compared to what we get from our former father or former mother, which is the United Kingdom. And that is a fact. So when they get cushioned by France, don't compare me to Cote d'Ivoire. I mean, listen, all their drugs are imported from France, and that is a fact. They don't take these, excuse me to say, Chinese derivatives. They don't have the likes of the Tobinkos, which you know is a fact. So clearly, our economies are not the same. Where Cote d'Ivoire is shepherded, let me say, by a parent with a huge chest, and I know that Macron will not leave Cote d'Ivoire hanging as the Brits. And I think Otumfuo said it so nicely that the Brits do a lot of bureaucratic talks with us, and when it comes to doling out support, they don't.
All right, Doc.
So that is one huge thing that is a fact.
I hear.
That the Ivorians are supported still by France, and that cannot be discounted from an economic perspective.
I hear. Let me turn to your colleague MP, Alhassan Suhuyini here. So your side were predicting that we have to go to the IMF. What did you say?
Not just them, though. I mean, let's be fair. You know, within the MPP party, there were people who were also...
Who and who?
I can state for a fact that former MP...
The former finance chairman of the...
Yes, that is one enough example. And within the majority caucus, some of us were not in support, but then it's majority, wins and rules. So let me clarify that.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Alhassan.
Thank you. Good morning, and good morning to Doc, our viewers, and very good people of the Tamale North constituency. First of all, I think that we must establish some truths. I will go into some of the issues that Doc has raised, but I want us to start from the point of some truths that have been denied for a very long time. One spoken by Mr. Lloyd Mensah, Professor Lloyd Mensah, that coincided, with the truths that the minority was speaking then, that our problems did not start when COVID hit. And our problems cannot, fairly and honestly be blamed on COVID or even Russia.
Solely on COVID.
Yes, that's what I said. It can't be solely blamed on COVID because the problems clearly started before COVID, before the 2020. The indicators were clear that we were slipping. And that is why I have said that it is like the child who inherits so much from the parents and did not appreciate the hard work the parents put in to establish the wealth that he came to meet. And so went into town bragging about having so much wealth and doing so well in life and organizing parties, be it Kenke or Wache, to celebrate the wealth that he had, inherited from the parents,
Sure.
without even giving credit to the suffering that the parent went through to create the wealth, only to deplete, and did not make the right investments that he came to meet with the wealth. And so depleted all that he came to meet. And by 2019, the prodigal son, and by 2019, it was clear that the child was wasting, what it came to meet on frivolous, expenditure.
Like what?
I mean, you name them. Flying luxuriously, and I mean, those contracts, the PDS deals, that you were denied. Yes, which cost us, and also has disorganized the power sector arrangements that would have brought in maybe some revenue and would have freed up. I mean, it affected us. You couldn't have ignored that. I mean, it's not possible for one to, it's not fair for one to ignore that. So a lot of those very reckless decisions that were taken, gave the indication by 2019 that we were slipping. And Mark Asibe also speaks the second truth that I talk about, that the gains that came out of the NDC's engagement with the IMF at the time that it did, were wasted. And they bragged about it, but they did not do the same hard work. They did not continue with the hard work that the NDC, engaged in to bring about the gains. They simply were excited about the gains and bragged about it, but did not do what Setekwe used to call smart borrowing, where you borrow to fund projects that can pay for themselves. So, for example, he used to talk about borrowing to do the Ghana gas, and the Ghana gas not only paying for itself, but creating jobs, ensuring that our imports of LPG is reduced by 50%, and the exchange, the dollars or foreign currency we need to mobilize to bring in crude reducing, and even LPG reducing, and all of that. You talk about the ports expansion and how much the ports are now raking in so that it can pay for itself and also increase government revenue. I mean, these are contracts you came to continue that you must be given credit. But I'm saying that, I mean, if you came to meet such self-financing projects and you had a windfall coming to you, you did not have any business engaging in what mostly or largely was consumption, expenditure. So if you take the budget for 2017, 2018, 2019, it is only 2020 that capital expenditure, in the budget, was appreciably high. Apart from that, 2017, 2018, 2019, we did less than 15% for capital expenditure. All the money went into recurrent expenditure, just things chop. You remember that famous chop, MP from Kumasi, who said about free education is not chop. Yes, a lot of, not a chunk, but some significant investments went into free education. But then again, the question is,
which will pay later.
The question is, did we have to do it the way that we did it? Before the 2016 general elections, it was clear to any fair-minded person in this country that both parties supported and thought there was a need for us to have education made free at the secondary level. After all, President Mahama at the time argued that it was actually a constitutional imperative that we must make education progressively free. But we looked at the kitty, how much was coming in, how much we could, bring in more, and how much it will require to do it in such a way that you will not compromise the quality. So the NDC thought that let's do it progressively, as the Constitution itself has
And even
mandated.
the finance minister.
But now the finance minister comes to agree with us. But then the NPP thought that, and with Nana Akufo-Addo thought that we should do it and damn the consequences. But when we raised the objection,
if after he had won, he had come to say, okay, I think I agree with you. I want to do. would you have agreed with him to say, let's do it the way you are proposing?
I mean, you cannot take away the fact that the NDC would have at least said, we told you so, but we would have supported it. Because that's what is good for this country.
Now, this is what you're saying.
Example,
But, you know,
for example, we are not excited that we are going to the IMF, but we have been sounding the alarm bells.
You seem very happy.
We have been sounding the alarm bells for a very long time now. So all you can see us do, which you may misinterpret to mean we are excited, is that we told you so. You should have listened to us. You shouldn't have ignored all the, wisdom from experienced managers of the economy. They have been there, they have handled it, and they were telling you that, look, you were slipping, you were taking us to a ditch. So if they had listened, maybe we would not be here. So, but now that we are here, it is our duty as an alternative government to cooperate with them and see how together we can get the best, out of the engagement with the IMF. Because you see,
how can we do that? And how can you, because you are members of parliament, how can you, members of parliament, ensure that Ghana is not getting a raw deal?
Well, it's a little too late in the day, unfortunately, for us to get the best deal from this engagement, because we have waited too long and we are having to engage the IMF clearly from a position of weakness without any prior planning.
Better late than never.
I agree, but I'm saying that we need to acknowledge the fact that it's a little too late for us to
Our
get
leverage is less.
out of the, exactly.
We don't have that much
engagement.
leverage.
The last time we went, the government of the day had the time to call on experts from all
we still have
the sides.
We still have
the political divide, the Royal Senchi,
we still have the
consensus.
We still have to.
That developed a blueprint called the homegrown solutions. Largely, the blueprint that came from Royal Senchi was what the IMF adopted, and it is online. I mean, forget about the propaganda about job freezes and all of that. If you go online and read the agreement between Ghana and the IMF, then you will not find those things. But there was that propaganda around it. So the previous government had that time to prepare a blueprint to engage the IMF constructively, and that led to the benefits that we all saw, which by 2016 showed that, according to the experts, by 2017, our economy, they predicted, was going to grow by about 9% of GDP. It was clearly predicted even before 2017, even before the new government came into office. Then you also had inflation rate, coming down and pointing further down. You had interest rates started coming down and pointing further down. All the macro, indicators that the NPP came to celebrate, showed signs of progress as a result of that preparedness that led to a constructive engagement with the IMF. In this case, unfortunately, we are being stampeded, like I think Dr. Bokwin puts it correctly. Instead of walking to the IMF, we are going there in an ambulance. And so it's very difficult for us at this point as members of parliament to contribute, because these discussions are currently being held with the executive, being the finance minister and the team.
It's still about enhanced domestic program, which means these are programs that we are taking to the IMF. And therefore, you can still have a say.
Yes, so exactly. I mean, we definitely will have a say. I mean, so we are hoping that whatever is being discussed with the IMF behind, closed doors now, because the discussions are held with the executive, will eventually be made available to members of parliament to contribute to. Obviously, whatever agreement is, reached will be brought to parliament for parliament to approve and to discuss it. And I'm sure it's at that point that we can make contributions. But again, even though we are being stampeded,
like
I will suggest, for example, that maybe the finance ministry, the presidency should begin to reach out to the finance committee if they cannot even engage the whole of parliament. The finance committee is made up of members of the NDC and the NPP, and it has one of the finest brains when it comes to the understanding of our economy, and also brains with experience, because you have Atu Forsen there, who has worked at the finance ministry as deputy finance minister, in charge of big portfolios. You have Isaac Adongo there, very, very good consultant over the years. years has worked in government circles, consulting for a lot of private and public
and the
firms.
chairman himself is
and the chairman himself is immediate past deputy, minister of finance. So they have the experience, they have the brains. You have John Jinapor there,
former bankers,
brilliant, finance and
Stephen Amwa, Dr. Stephen.
So they should engage. They shouldn't wait to finish. They shouldn't wait to finish their discussion with the IMF before they introduce Parliament into it. I think they should.
And I think even IMF itself will make that recommendation.
They do. I mean, I know that they have an arrangement where they.
But gentlemen, I want us to still with the IMF.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the number of times we've been to the IMF and the fact that we still have to go back to them, a lot of us do agree that going to them is not sustainable.
Why so?
Because you would have to run to them almost all the time.
No.
But how can we build our economy such that it wouldn't be for us to be running to the IMF in ambulances? How can't we do that? Are we saying that we cannot develop our economy without the IMF?
So let me say this. The world is so interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say this largely. Listen, America runs on loans.
Mm-hmm.
Even that big economy runs on loans. Mm-hmm. And if you want to expand, you need some loan facilities. And IMF is one of the organizations that will give you one of the best interest rates. So then you are not necessarily, forced, but it's the best alternative. Mm-hmm. So as we stand, we went to the market after IMF. Mm-hmm. And the market interest rates are different than what IMF would give you. And the market will also push you to do things that are very bold, and that is where we are now. And I think that the IMF is one of the alternatives.
Yeah.
But we won't stay with.
We went to the IMF to withdraw some funds that didn't come with the sort of conditionalities that this program will come with. Is that not true? That you can go to the IMF to take some facilities that won't come with conditionalities. This one will come with it because your economy is ailing. And I'm asking, that can we develop our economy such that, yes, we can go to the IMF for loans that will not come with conditionalities because our economy will be doing better. Can we build an economy like that?
Listen, the likes of Germany after World War II were blessed with, a huge facility, which was called the Marshall Plan. We haven't had our Marshall Plan. The likes of Ukraine, even now, as you know, America has channeled a lot of resources to Ukraine to keep them afloat. We haven't had that, even with quote-unquote COVID. Looking at the direct expenditure for COVID care alone, I wouldn't say that it was sufficient, what came in. I mean, per what I'm seeing on the surface. So I really think that, one, is unfortunate we don't have our Marshall Plan as a country. And then secondly, we have an issue with population growth, which other countries do not have. The Western world actually has the reverse, where they are not growing at an appreciable rate. People are giving birth to just one or two, and the reverse is here. We have, a huge home, and our population growth is not keeping at pace with our, economic growth, and that is why we are in this quagmire. And these are some of the hard facts that we have to appreciate, or else, if we don't put controls, measures, or expand appropriately with the increasing growth of our population, where the needs for amenities are huge. I mean, if we look at GNPC, for instance, and what they've spent on toilets alone, you'd be surprised. I mean, and that is largely because of the population increment, or even classroom blocks. So we are burdening government at a faster rate than our economy can hold.
I also think that we need to be very real with ourselves. It's not just, I agree with you that population is, a very big issue, not just for Ghana, but in Africa, dealing with our population growth vis-a-vis,
government
resources and the need to provide for it. It's a big problem. I am aware of that. But we also, as a people, especially sometimes when we experience a boom in our economy, tend to be very reckless.
It's youthful exuberance.
And so for you cannot, I mean, the president of today cannot be described as a
youthful exuberance in terms of economic terms.
Okay.
The country is a young democracy.
The 17 times that we have been, what you notice is that we always experience a boom and then a dip, a boom and a dip, a boom and a dip. So what happens? What do we do to get the boom? Why are we not able to sustain what we do to get the boom? Because every time we engage the IMF, our sovereign, rating improves. Our debt to GDP, gets better. Our physical, space increases. But what do we do with that afterwards? We go into town and we start engaging in very reckless expenditure.
I think you ought to qualify your recklessness a bit, because I think that one. And this is where I differ.
The loans. How must he qualify? Because you see, in 2010, when we started the oil production, it brought in a lot of revenue, and the thought was that we're going to use that revenue to change our path so that we don't run back to the IMF crying again. But what did we do? Like he said, we engage in recklessness.
For example, I'll give you. Let me continue and give you examples. Let me continue and give you examples.
The health facilities we're building are not reckless. The schools we're building are not reckless.
No. You see, I agree with you that those are not reckless.
But how much how much are we building?
The way you even do it. But let me even bring it home. Let me bring it home. You
the education we're giving. You
talked about 2010. By 2011, we were the fastest growing economy when we posted. Yes, one of the fastest growing economies when we posted about 14%, of GDP. I mean, that was unprecedented, and it still remains unprecedented under the NDC and under any government, at least under the Fourth Republic. It's unprecedented. Now, what did we do? We saddled ourselves with a policy that led to the doubling of salaries of public sector workers, known as what? Single spine.
But it was
now, wait. Now, that was supposed to be tied to productivity. As we speak today, we have not tied that in.
Because of malaria?
No. So we engage in a policy that was supposed, again, by our predictions, to be revenue neutral. The increment was not to affect the revenue that we were generating. In the course of the implementation, we realized that it was not revenue neutral. Again, instead of putting in structures that will measure productivity and increase productivity, today, if you speak to the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, they will tell you that they still have not finished that component of factoring in productivity in determining public sector salaries. Now, that is what led to us, mobilizing so much just to pay ourselves. And President Mahama had to make the point by 2014 that, look, because of the implementation of single spine, we have all chopped the meat to the bone. That was the purpose of that statement. That was again spin out, as if to suggest that the government had chopped the meat to the bone. And he said, because we all agreed to pay our public sector workers, fairly, we have chopped all the money. And so let's all sit together and think of how we can raise more and also get productivity from people. It was the beginning of the idea behind the Royal Senchi consensus. Then we got, unfortunately, around that same time, hit by a colonial, let me put it that way, dumso. I call it colonial because every time we were warned by the experts that the dumso were getting gradually under Rawlings, the one we had gradually under Kufuor, the one we had gradually under Mills, was going to get worse if we did not put in the right investments. So they kept warning us, but we kept managing it and massaging it and pushing the problem forward until it came to the doorstep of President Mahama as president and crashed on his hands. But being the leader that he was, he said, I will fix this. I will not manage it. You remember President Kufuor managed it with toy machines. It was Samuel Kojo Brace who described them as toy machines, just brought in some things to stabilize the power. And so he had to do the heavy lifting of investing to deal with the financial problem that the sector was faced with. Yes, to deal with the fuel pressure problem. You remember the West African gas pipeline? When I was a journalist, I don't remember the number of times we had to report on how the West Africa gas pipeline has been hit by, pirates, and so gas couldn't flow, and so our plants couldn't function, and because of that, power rationing had to come. We had to invest in the Ghana gas infrastructure to secure and guarantee our own gas. That's why you may not have problems with too much.
Honorable,
I'm saying that these investments, if we had continued in that manner, I mean, these are the sort of investments that you do that one, they pay for themselves, and they also give you a certain guarantee of independence, financial independence, so to speak. But when you invest in, I'm sorry, but
I said, give me an example.
When you make cathedrals the priority of priorities,
that is the most
priority of priority.
But then, I mean,
it just tells you.
So that's the one reckless thing you are saying.
But there are several reckless ones.
The facilities, the roads are important.
This one is the icing on all the records.
On the cake, yeah.
On the cake of recklessness.
I want you to give us suggestions. I mean, your suggestions, 2, 3 of them. We want to build an economy that is not reliant on the IMF. When I hear you, it looks like it's not something we can do. But
in the interim, I mean, in the foreseeable 10, 15 years, it's not going to be possible.
We cannot.
I don't think so.
Build an economy that's not reliant on the IMF.
Listen, we toyed with the idea. Let me put it quite frankly. The finance minister toyed with the idea of Ghana running off IMF. And look at where we are. And I think that we're a baby economy, baby democratic institution. We have to face the reality. It takes time. These things that we see in other places.
So going forward, what would be a suggestion?
Well, I think that one, our president, has to, by all means, do some adjustments in terms of government expenditure. And that one, whether we like it or not, that's the reality. If the revenues are not coming, just like the shortfalls from, e-levy and all other governmental programs, which we were thinking would rake in some revenue. If it's not coming, without money, you can't do anything. So clearly, our president, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, without a doubt, has to cut somewhere, and that will be a choice he makes as a president.
So you can suggest where he has to cut?
Well, I mean, one of the glaring things, which I doubt. I mean, I've always been of the opinion that maybe 16 district hospitals would be appropriate, which then will reduce government expenditure. So instead of 111, we have 16 regions now. We can do 16. So that is one such option. I don't know how possible it is to cut because the winds have, the ship has taken sail already. And I don't know all the new, in-depth deals that have gone on. But I think that is one. Now, some have also suggested that we revisit the free SHS program, where certain things can be offloaded back to the parents. And what I mean by that is that maybe the meals aspect, because that's a huge chunk. Granted that some students struggle with a meal on their table before lectures. So that these are some of the difficult decisions that we all, political, all stakeholders, including the people of Ghana, have to come to terms with. And I think that in one of my write-ups, I state that the IMF is going to put us all in check, even our citizenry, because there's that perception that government is supposed to be offering everything for free. And that one key thing in economics, there are no free meals. Whatever you're thinking and hoping for free, somebody is paying for that. And I think our attitude as Ghanaians ought to be looked at. We literally feel very entitled. But then the Westerners, they wake up, they are born to note one key thing, that you pay for what you want. Okay. And I think that as we sit in our plush cars or trotros and the roads are bad, we have to come to terms with the fact that if we want good roads, if we want electricity to be on, if we want water to be running, we need to pay our fair share. Okay. And that is the mantra. That thing has to be imbibed in us, whether NDC, MPP, CPP, whatever our creed is, even religiously, so that we change that mindset to being part of improving our development. And until that is done,
Doc makes a very good point about cutting down on expenditure. But I mean, there are those who you can say are cynical, and they say, how do you cut what you don't have? I mean, already the revenue is not coming in. And so when the government says that I'm cutting down on expenditure by 30%, it's as if they have the money to spend, and so they are cutting down. In fact, whether you announce the cut or not, you can't spend it because you don't even have the money in the first place. Now, the problem I have with some of these announcements of investments into health and others is
railroads.
Is sometimes the lack of transparency around the engagements are done. Now, lack of transparency leads to, and you can forgive me to think so, losses that are needless. For example, if you go to the La General Hospital, it was saving lives, delivering babies, and bringing in at least some revenue. Today is a rubble. What kind of thinking went into it? It's a rubble. Please,
work in progress.
Go there and see. It's a rubble for over a year now. It's been so. Now, what kind of planning and engagements went into it? What you and I can agree on is that it costs something. Some people have chopped some money there. But the hospital is no more. Go to trade fair. It's a rubble. What is happening with trade fair?
No, I thought...
And yet, it has been pulled down, and I'm sure some monies have exchanged hands, whether legally or illegally. Some people have made some money, but trade fair is a rubble. You talk about Agenda 111. You recall the issue the ranking member was raising about $34 million or so in the budget that could not be accounted for. Yet, we are on platforms singing Agenda 111, and we do not even have any construction going on.
There's construction.
I mean, some kind of work at the various sites.
That's why he's saying happening. That we should cut them down.
But I'm saying that some of these things don't even give you the assurance that there will be some waste checked.
We need to move on.
So is it 16 district hospitals as opposed to 111?
Well, I to some extent I agree with you. I mean, we would not even be here if the president had kept his promise of ensuring that districts without, hospitals, were going to get districts. Because that was the initial promise before even COVID hit.
Okay.
He got reminded by it only when COVID hit. And then
thank you very much.
To 98 and now to 111 and just populism.
Okay, let's do with your own house. Sarah Joseph was supposed to appear before the Privilege Committee. She failed to appear. Now, what's next?
I was there yesterday in support of my regional minister, and Honorable Henry Korte did very well in explaining and also seeking forgiveness. There's one thing that we've all learned: we ought to document or make sure that there's a report of whatever we do, because clearly Parliament was fully aware that he had an ill health issue, but it was not documented, and that is why he landed there. With regards to Honorable Anyaa Sowutuom, she's my senior colleague. I would prefer not to comment on that.
Why wouldn't you? Your constituent would want you to represent them, and they are not happy with how things are going.
As it stands now, I think that it's not supposed to be guilty before proven, and at the point in time, I've not heard her side of the story. So I think that the jury is still out there. We need to still...
She gave her side of the story on Joy News.
Joy News is not Parliament. It's not under oath. You understand?
But will it be different from what she would tell
it could be. It could be. So under oath, what she says is what I would, on a personal note, be able to comment about. Joy News isn't Parliament.
All right.
And it's not Privileges Committee. So I think we'll wait to see. But clearly, hers is also bordering on health, and what is good for the gander is good for the, what, is it geese as well? So I would hope that if on health grounds, Honorable Ken and Honorable Henry will be relieved, then I think the same thing will be extended to her.
But has there been a conclusion that those two are being relieved?
If. Yeah. I said if.
Honorable.
Well, of the three, I think the one I sympathize with the most is Henry Kojo. I mean, he's a fantastic gentleman. Tend to have his focus right on, you know, some of the things that he embarks on, either on behalf of his government or his constituents.
Thank you very much.
He's a fantastic, you know, guy, and very committed to his work. So, and I'm also aware, because, you know, around that time we did see how sometimes he had to struggle to come, you know, to Parliament. I remember when government, you know, using shenanigans on and off the book, tried to pass the e-levy. It was such a difficult time for some of them, I recall. And, you know,
even the NDC.
Yeah, well, but for more on your side. Yeah. You know, but so he's the one I sympathize with the most. And I acknowledge the point that Doc makes about how sometimes we can take certain things for granted because we assume that everybody knows that I'm not well, I'm going for treatment, and so even if I do not indicate in the House, using the right procedure to, you know, cause the information to be circulated, I can be excused.
And you
so
see, there's one
he's
thing,
the one I sympathize
There's
with.
one other thing too. Let me say it here.
Yeah.
We are unfair to parliamentarians or some public office holders when it comes to their health details and how we spend them. And let me just use this to say that, you know, he said it painfully, that his health has been toyed with. People sometimes claim he's in coma when it's not the case. So he was very particular about sharing his health, you know, status with people because, you know, the likes of, you know, the propagandist spin stories about his health. And I think that these are things that the media houses also need to look at. Because there were instances where
your own
some media houses
say that even if it's your health and you want to absent yourself, you need to get permission.
Exactly.
And
No,
so if you don't have that permission,
this is the case where
we should sympathize with you because
no, I don't think that. I don't think it's a good excuse.
I'm not saying it's an excuse, but I'm just saying that
I like the part that you
aspect
said, we all sometimes take it for granted. I mean, I'm traveling to my constituency, and my intention is that I'll be back before the day ends, and so I do not even fill the absence form. And then I go and maybe something happens and I have to sleep over. Emergency, I have to sleep over. I'll be marked absent when I could have simply filled, you know, an absence form that will capture
and
me.
Sometimes
so we take things for granted because with his ill health, he could have still, you know, just written to the speaker, and that would have been between him and the speaker. You know, and the speaker would have granted him the extension of time that he needed. So let's not go into the spin and the propaganda.
But I think we ought to change.
But I think that I think that I mean, it comes with the territory. That your opponent.
Why don't you rather make you know, develop a procedure or something that would, like in the case of Anyaa Sowutuom, if you think that the case would make you absent yourself from Parliament for, say, 6 months and over, you have to relinquish your seat, and then it's declared vacant. Can't that be a solution?
This is a different situation.
It's a different situation. I mean, yes, that's why the rules say that when you absent yourself 14 days, 15 days without any justifiable reason, your seat should be declared vacant.
Yes,
so you are even talking about 6 months. But the rule says 15 days without justifiable explanation, within a session, your seat should be declared
vacant. But like he
vacant.
is saying, and like many other people are saying, so Anyaa Sowutuom says that it's because of health grounds. That's why I'm away. She's been away for how many
Well,
months?
many judges have also experienced this, and the populist people, or let me say, have not come after.
I mean,
I don't vote for the judge. I vote for my MP.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, there's still room for it. If you look at the Constitution, and I can't remember the law that I saw, the particular legislation that I saw, that also talks about how to remove members of Parliament. I mean, the constituents can actually bring a petition to the Speaker, demanding that she be, removed from Parliament. They can do that through the party. It is permitted. So you don't even have to vacate your seat for 6 months. If you go on health grounds and the constituents feel that your health situation is such that you can no longer represent them or give them the best representation, they can actually bring a petition before the speaker, and the speaker will table it for the House to take a decision.
How is that petition brought? You said through
the party. Through the party.
But if the people send it to the party and the party doesn't bring it.
That is where the challenge is, because the party sponsors people to stand elections. You understand? So, I mean, whatever you do must go through the party. But I think that any party will be foolhardy to ignore a petition coming from majority of constituents demanding that a particular member of parliament be removed. Right. So I go back to the point that Henry Kotte is the one among the three that I sympathize with.
Okay.
As for Sarah Adwoa Safo, my position on her is clear. In fact, I do not think that the executive has conducted itself well, because Sarah Adwoa Safo is not just a legislator. A legislator. She's more than that. I mean, Doc and I are legislators. You understand? But Adwoa Safo is a member of the executive. In fact, a cabinet portfolio is under her care. And if the leader of the executive, looks on whilst her important appointee, like Sarah Adwoa Safo, is a wall,
There's somebody acting at the moment.
Come on.
So keep that in mind.
That's just. We are talking about the gender ministry, a ministry for the vulnerable, and you're talking about a period where we are coming out of COVID, and that situation with Russia, Ukraine has created more vulnerabilities in our society, and the minister responsible for that sector
missing in action.
Is missing completely in action, and the president who appointed her,
gentlemen,
is impotent, unable to act on this matter, and we all just look on as if it's fine.
There's working.
I think that we must demand that the president fires her. That's the least that he can do of all the weaknesses, all the impotency that he has shown on many matters. This is the list. Just ask the chief of staff to draft a letter relieving Adwoa Safo of her post. Simple.
Okay.
The list, if he can't find a finance minister, cannot do a reshuffle. This is the list.
Okay.
Then when that is done, I will now encourage the legislature to also take action.
Okay.
But until that is done, I think we are engaged in much ado about nothing.
Gentlemen, let me still take you back to the IMF, because the news we are getting from the BBC is that Boris Johnson will be stepping down as leader of the Conservative, because recently there have been some huge number of resignations that has hit him. So he'll be stepping down as leader. Now, in that regard, with that example, because we say our parents are the British.
But our parents are not taking care of us. They are not.
That's not. In that regard, with the several calls that have come on the finance minister to step down, shouldn't he take that action by him stepping down to say that, look, I think that I didn't even believe in the IMF thing in the first place. We've gone there, and I don't want to stay on to see the country through the spirit. That's
a decision that should be left for him. And I think that if I was in that situation, it's highly likely I would resign. That is me, And I think that culture is not very much Ghanaian at the moment. We're not used to resigning. There's this phrase, till the wheels fall off. And I think that is become an African thing where it's almost till the wheels fall off. But I think that it might be a gentleman thing to do, pair where we are now, and even on health grounds. I think that just on health grounds, pair what I know and have heard, some rest would do for him some good. And I don't know, it's a very difficult decision to make either way. But I think that if I was in that situation, highly likely I would let new ideas, a new mindset come to look at the matters at hand and to stay aback and maybe be in the advisorial role more so than being actively involved. But that's just my opinion, not the party, not the government's opinion. Yeah.
Alhassan?
Well, I agree with you. I'm not surprised about what has happened to Boris Johnson. The writing was clearly on the wall. He's an interesting politician, though one that I have studied. I just have taken the pain to, read so much about him. So I'm not surprised that this has happened. But I agree again with Doc that look, that kind of attitude and conduct is short in supply in Africa, especially in Ghana. And sometimes you wonder if you can blame the people, in position entirely for that kind of attitude. We have seen how people, in taking such decisions, when they do, get ridiculed, and put down and never given, an opportunity. I remember when the late, her soul rest in peace, Jifar Tivo, for example, decided to step aside as a result of the bus Brandon, which, by the way, was just 3 million Ghana cedis. Can you imagine the millions that are flying around these days and nobody is held accountable for it? I mean, she decided to step aside. She was not given roses for taking that decision. In fact, it was rather seen as, evidence of how corrupt the government of the day was and all of that. So some of these things don't encourage. I mean, the administration, for example, could have been seen as one that is purging itself, of wrongdoings, being responsible. When was the name Victoria Hammer talked about how she is thinking of making $1 million. I mean, a very innocent statement. Who doesn't want to be rich? I mean, if you are doing it the legal way. But it became a crime and she had to be fired from her post. As a result of getting fired, the administration, John Mahama, didn't get roses and get praise for, trying to ensure some discipline in his government. He was rather ridiculed and insulted and made to look like, that is evidence of the corruption. So sometimes you don't know who to blame for the lack of such attitude in our body politics. But it is in short supply around here. And I believe that the finance ministers, the finance minister has he has overstayed his welcome. I mean, he shouldn't have even been part of the second, administration of Nana Akufo-Addo. But God, this government. This is cousin, for crying out loud. And we know what, family means to the president and the people around him. And so he had to, even grandfathered. You remember his vetting and the whole process. The Parliament of Ghana's committee had to wait for him, to be grandfathered to meet the committee, to be vetted and all that. So,
but that was on health grounds.
Well, but I'm saying, anyway, was he the only one capable?
That's fine.
When he shouldn't have even been part of the second team. You had to do all of this to make it possible for him to still be part of the second team. Now he has taken us to the ditch. He simply doesn't have the credibility.
IMF is not a ditch.
The former president has called many times for the president to fire him. He's unable to fire him. But let me give you information that may be useful.
Okay.
Look, some of us in Parliament have begun talking about perhaps helping the president because it is clear that he's impotent. He's unable to do his job.
Why do you use the word impotent?
Yeah, I am choosing that word deliberately, especially when it relates to Ajua Sarah Safu. But I'm saying that clearly the man has demonstrated a lot of impotence when it comes to carrying out his job as president. So some of us in Parliament have begun the talk of possibly bringing the finance minister to a vote of no confidence. Some of us have started talking, and we just hope that leadership will endorse this, and a vote of censure will be called on the finance minister. He cannot simply be leading us at this very critical time when he is one of the people you can hold responsible the most for the crisis that we are going through.
Interesting. So a vote of no confidence is due to.
If we could add the vice president, we would have. But
is due to come up.
He's the manager. He's the economic management leader.
You know that's not possible.
Let's see.
If we don't have saying we could, because the constitution doesn't allow how that. But the finance minister we are discussing.
Let's see how that goes. So it means that we should expect a vote of no confidence.
Possibly, especially if we get the support of a majority of members. We will table the vote of censure on the finance minister.
Okay.
The Parliament of Ghana must do the job that the president is unable to do on behalf of the people of Ghana.
All right. Thank you very much. Our time is up. But I'll just give you 2 minutes to get your thought on the strike that has hit the education sector. They are calling for government to give them what they call the cost of living allowance. Let me start with you, Alhassan.
I think it is absolutely necessary that the government does that, and I commend the workers' union for being very proactive. I think they saw the danger when government started thinking about going to the IMF, because one of the things you are going to expect the IMF to tell the government to do is to freeze wage increases. I mean, it's almost always the first thing you will get. Freeze wage increases, maybe freeze some employment in the public sector, apart from replacements. I mean, those are some of the things that you will always get, especially because you have a situation where your revenue is not meeting your expenditure. So they are going to advocate for some cuts. So the workers hit, a little too late in the day, but the timing is right.
They are warning that government
exactly.
must not accept.
As the IMF is negotiating, they must also be hearing that the workers that they are counting on to bring about increase in revenue and increase in productivity as a result are saying that they need more. And clearly, I mean, everybody's economy has been hit badly. And we unfortunately all have to still buy from the same market and at the exorbitant prices that goods are being sold. Sometimes these days you are not even able to predict the price. You buy something in the morning and you are not certain if you get it at the same price the next morning. So it is long overdue. The cost of living allowance, known as COLA, must be given, because clearly the cost of living...
Not Coca-Cola.
Not Coca-Cola. The cost of living has just gone off, out of everybody's control, and they deserve it. I mean, government must find a way. The problem with the government is when they say they are not able to, fund such very critical needs in our lives. Like when the TUC talked about reduction in fuel prices on May Day, and the president was quick to say no, he will leave losing about 4 billion if they reduce their taxes. They reduce their taxes on fuel and all of that. But then the next moment, people see, payment notices, transferring 20-something million to one person who just draws a church, just the act, and then he wants COLA. He wants COLA. Cost of living has gone high. He just wants something small to be able to pay for his child's school fees and feed his children. And then you tell him there's no money. And he said, okay, maybe the country is hard, there's no money. Then he sees the news, 23 million for someone who has painted a church.
No, he didn't just paint.
I mean,
he didn't just paint.
But that's how the person is going to see it.
No, but
then he sees 100 and something million for the president flying around the world. And then the presidential jet is packed. And when you say, oh, he must travel in luxury, he is president. And I'm like, my child who I just want to pay.
We didn't say luxury, we said health.
I mean, so the kind of things that the government does makes it difficult for them to even engage these people and convince them that things are really hard for them to, and they are not able to meet some of these demands. I think that cost of living must be given. How much I am unable to tell, but COLA is an imperative at this stage.
Okay.
So I think that the key thing is money is fungible. And what I mean by that is maybe the NPP came and then gave teacher allowances, but not necessarily improving the cost of living allowances. But really, at the end of the day, the NPP government has been very considerate in terms of the welfare of the teachers. And I think that You know, I mean, there's also even this arrangement for laptops for them. I mean,
What's
so
the use
if I can come in,
training allowance?
what I'm saying is that
when
they may not have this direct cost of living allowance, but there are things that add up to, you know, incentives that add up to their wellness.
No, but
and that should be considered.
The laptop won't buy fuel for him.
No, they would have maybe have to take their own money to buy the laptop.
But they are still
the laptop, they are paying for it.
It's through another facility.
Yes.
So my key point
But these
here,
are monies that would have come to them.
it is almost like, instead of giving you rent, giving you a place to live, it still improves your wellness. And that is what I'm trying to get at. That government might not necessarily give you cash, but will give you the amenities which you'd have had to spend monies on. So I really think that the MPP may not have given them direct cash, but has at least given consideration to allowances that were scrapped at some point, which he knows, which he can't deny.
Which is a reckless thing to reintroduce, completely reckless.
Well, but it added to their wellness. You
it is a reason why
that is why I'm saying that
such, you know, populous.
So what is so clear is the fact that, like I said, money is fungible. The allowances that were given them,
and that's the point we used.
Does not fall under cost of living allowance.
The nurses recently were demonstrating.
To make your point.
You saw the nurses; they were demonstrating recently. It's not as if they didn't get allowance in school. You pay them allowances in school. What's the use of the allowance they chop in school when they come out and they can't get a job? Because you have used all the money that you would have used to pay them for life to give them allowance for 3 years.
The key point here is that what I'm trying to arrive at is that their welfare has been sorted out or supported in a different way, not necessarily through the cost of living allowance, which is the COLA we are talking about, but at least the NPP has given them some
teachers
cushion.
Who cannot meet their daily needs should be grateful that training teachers are getting allowance.
So, Doc, will you advise government to honor the request by these teachers? Because
I think that the truthfulness now, or what is very clear, is that really government didn't have the means, and that is why they were not at the table to then offer them these additional benefits. That is what is the fact now, because if they had, would not be with IMF. So teachers should give consideration to government, because what is so clear now is that the chest or the kitty is not as full, is maybe half empty. You know, and on that note,
they are citing how much government or the executive had increased its salaries, and they say that if you did by this much, and we are having to endure the brunt of
that misnomer, and I beg to differ. I always say that, you know, teachers should be guided in the fact that government or the president's increment was not his salary, but then other agencies were brought into the executive for like the CODA, like also NAPCO, like ambulance services, which I think eventually with IMF coming maybe will be returned to the appropriate ministry. So for instance, CODA might go to state housing, works and housing, sorry. Okay. Ambulances would go to Ministry of Health, you know. So these, and then right away, that will drop the president's budget.
So dissolution of some ministries, you think?
No, listen, these are governmental flagship programs that were absorbed, you know, like the what was it? Is it IPEP? The one now? Yeah. All of these things should go to the appropriate ministries. Okay. And that will then drop the apparent bloat in the president's budget. Okay. So it isn't salary of the president that was increased, but then the expenditures of government at the executive increased because of the absorption of these
but their salaries
people.
Were increased.
Their salaries were increased. The staff size has almost tripled.
The staff size is because of these programs that have gone.
No, the presidential staff.
Zongo development is there now.
You know, presidential staffers and all of those have almost tripled.
Salaries were increased. That's a fact.
Well, that per every year there's an agreed
yes, but that's
upon.
what the teachers were saying, that you increase yours by this much and increase ours by this much, and it's not commensurate with the sort of inflation we're enduring.
Well,
now.
he says that
So
they are
give
paying
us-
teacher allowance, so they should be grateful.
No.
That's what he said.
I'm saying
That's what he
that
said.
there's been some
paying teacher allowance, so they
contributions, and I
allowance
also
in
added
arrears of more than
I added
4 months, 6
rental
months.
arrangements. I added that too. Facilities have been created for teacher housing, which through Works and State Housing.
Where?
Oh, some of
Are they
these-
enjoying it now?
Well,
Because
investments
the issue is the now.
It's just
okay.
Fuel prices are high. Cost of things on the
Well, this is
market
affecting
are
me
high.
too.
Exactly.
True or
That's it.
false?
No, but you are entitled to your request. You can go there and tell the president,
Maybe
well,
we should
you
also
have to
begin to
exactly.
do that, because
they
we
think
don't
they
even know
are
our
feeling the pain,
conditions
so
of
they have requested. You can also request as
And that is
I think
serious.
so. We also need.
Now with IMF,
Anyway,
if it was
on-
10, now it will be maybe 5. We're in trouble.
On that note, thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for hosting
Dr.
us.
Dickson Adomako Kissi is MP for Anyaa Sowutuom, and Alhassan Suhuyini is MP for Tamale North. Well, after the break, we have a chat with the General Secretary of the Ghana National Association of Teachers. We'll take a quick break. When we return, we'll bring you much more on the AM show. Stay with us.